that we have seen as a pattern changing. Second is place the demand, also work out on the disruption that can happen on the sea because you're going to get that freight, right? So on an average, 9 months ago, we have to place our demands, right? So what am I going to sell in winter, I'm going to predict in hot summer in India and say that this much amount of tin is what I'm going to do. And if I'm running short of it, I don't have any other source next door, right? And just because we have amazing marketing teams, etc., who would like to make up, right? So we also design festive tins. So if you sometimes buy a Nivea tin in Diwali, you'll find Diwali firecrackers on the tin, and it's a special edition that we make, right? This means I have to get it right, and in India, Diwali doesn't happen every time at one location, one time, right? So last year it was mid of November, and now it's first week of November. So how do you make sure that you put in? And hence, demand sensing plays a very, very important role, I would say. But you should also break it down as to what level you need it. Sometimes it's also an over-abused concept, I would say. Why? Because you really don't need to know how much a customer in Ludhiana will buy a Nivea tin, right? That is, yes, it's needed. You have a whole value chain, and hence there is an inventory in pipeline. Do you need this kind of inventory? No. I see overall pipeline in India shrinking. But to understand and ensure that you have it at Ludhiana at that point in time, I would say while you focus a lot on forecast accuracy, also focus on how are you distributing it, right? If you don't have your right distribution model in place, you might put it. And sometimes the owners of supply chain is so much into forecasting that we then don't understand what's the supply plan, what's the distribution plan, how are you going in sensing. Because you might make your demand sensing super, super good by using AI, ML, a lot of tools available now thanks to the startup culture that we've seen post-COVID in India, right? But just having an amazingly good demand plan doesn't serve the purpose. You have to get your entire chain linked to it and hence ensure that everything in the chain works together. Otherwise, you might have a problem. So next time when you go out and you would like to have a Nivea tin and you don't see it, I think just don't blame it on forecast, but also see maybe there is, and I hope you don't have such situation. All of you, when you go out to the store, you find a Nivea tin. But it's important that we put that, and with more and more disruption happening and more ESG compliance, all of this also coming in play, it's important that you get your ingredient sourced on time because everybody's changing a lot of things, right? So hence, this definitely is a very, very critical factor to how we put it, and there is no dearth of data. So I think just get that right, and you would put it.
Thanks, Neha. Saurav, would you like to add to what Neha's thoughts are and the practicality of demand sensing and forecasting tools?
Sure. So my personal viewpoint on this aspect is that demand management and forecasting is based on first principles. It's like how accurate you are. I mean, no ecosystem, no category, no business line can act like 100% do a 100% accuracy. Like, so that is like the first metric like I personally and my teams operate. Second is like the accuracy percentage also gives you a viewpoint like how closer to the actual demand. And like I was just going through a book sometime back, I mean, why supply chain leaders as on data becoming the next CEOs. I mean, like 20 years before the line, nobody used to think that a supply chain leader will become the CEO of a firm. The best part about our business vertical is that we are closer to the business, we are closer to the demand, and we have that intelligence between different parts of different metrics or different value chain. Like for give an example, if a particular product is having a bias of more than 40%, and if I have the storage capacity to store the product in a tier 3 location of the country, then I will plan my supply chain in that manner. And that is where unified data comes into play, which actually connects the entire value chain right from the actual demand to the value creation where the value created at the upstream source point. So I think that from a business lens is very important. I mean, this is my view from the, and even as on it, because I come from a food industry, there is a very tectonic shift like what Vijay rightly mentioned that demand should be unbiased. But the problem with the Indian customer specifically in this vertical is that we are biased. I mean, if I have to order like a food, like if for 5 of us, I'll just go and see like which, I'll like see which is the best rated and where I'm getting the best discount. So it is very difficult to predict on that aspect also. And firms like Zeptos, I mean, they are using unified data to that extent that, for example, if you have a certain frequency of ordering a product at a certain interval, they will ensure that the pin code from where you are being served, they will block that particular order for that day, so that their repeat is going on a loop. So that's the extent of business are using actually unified data. I mean, apart from the true supply chain sense.
Interesting thoughts, and I just go back 24 years ago, during my beginning of my career, when we talked about forecast accuracy, the first question was forecast, right? Forecast is a forecast, cannot be accurate. Look at the weather forecast we have in India. But having said that, demand sensing, as the term changed, it gave more realistic view to the demand we are looking at.
I'll just add something to it, just a couple of things. So demand sensing terminology, I think since last 5 years, we are hearing about it. Okay, and I'm wondering, what does this mean? So we have a lot of consultants, Big Fours coming to us for pharma, for a lot of planning tools to get implemented and all. So I asked one of them saying that, yeah, you'll be able to sense the demand, you would know where the demand is. The next question which I asked is, do you know that how do you take demand today? Okay, and it's top driven. The sales guys get a target, the medical reps, the targets are distributed, and that target gets converted into forecast, and that comes to us. We can only say that, okay, last month you've not sold so much in this particular area, in this particular region, or this particular headquarters. But the inputs comes from sales. And basis that, you go back, you look at your stock levels, if it is inventory is there in your warehouse, and whatever is not available, you would manufacture based on the lead time, capacity, procure it, run an MRP, and get your stuff done. And we actually wanted to look at how do we actually tackle this particular problem. Do we actually know what demand sensing means? So I asked my demand planners saying that you're taking the inputs, putting things on Excel, and showing, saying that this is a forecast accuracy, 75%, 80%. But what does 75%, 80% means to us? Actually, when we actually go into further details, we only know that the demand, what sales we are doing to our distributors. Let's say, I take an example of a pharma. For our organization, we 8,000 distributors. Do we know the stock levels of the distributors, what's happening? Okay. Why does it so happen that in the last week we have 60% of the sales? Suddenly, in our business, pharma is actually, it's a branded generics, which means the doctors need to prescribe, which means koi bimar pad raha hai, doctor ke paas ja raha hai, and they are saying that, okay, take Alchem's this product. Someone is prescribing, okay? So weather and everything is there. But in this market, Alchem is not the only company. There are 3,000 plus pharma companies who are actually there. Do we know the stock movements, what's happening at the distributors level? Do we know what's happening to almost 12 lakh retailers across India? What product is getting sold at any given point of time? That data is not available everywhere. When we deep dive into it, we get to know that this market is really very much fragmented. Many of their distributors are actually the investors who make quick money, because the last 60% of the sales which happens is because the sales guys gets incentives, and he parts some of the incentives with these so-called distributors to make sure that bulk sales happen at one go, and he gets that incentive. And once he gets that incentive, he parts. So this is a clear-cut chain. And now who has to bell this cat from a top management perspective? Somebody has to go and say that, okay, if this is how we want to sell, at one particular point of time, we'll see stock piling. I mean, that's why we also have returns coming up. So returns to the tune of 5%, 3%, 1% is also there. So how do you control that? If demand was there, the returns would have not happened. So I think this is more of a vicious circle. So I had to actually send my demand planners to the market saying that go and sit with the distributors, know their stock positions, go to the retailers, talk about how do they sell, and that's where actually the demand sensing clearly happens. Okay. Today, many of you must be also from Mumbai. Today, retailers also are very smart. You talk about the doctor writing pandy. There was a time where the doctor used to write saying that I have go to that shop, get that medicine, and I will tell you how much to do. Din mein do baar lena, teen baar lena, and all that he would say. Now he also does not have time. That shift has happened. Doctors are more, the new generation, they don't want to have dispensary, they want to go to hospitals and specialized things in that. Now that change has enabled the retailers like Wellness Forever. The other day I was asking, give me pandy. And he bought similar maybe drug, but a different make, saying that ye lijiye, ye acha hai. And I said, I am from Pharma, I know what you're trying to do. It's like substitution of your brand. So now, earlier your influencer was doctor. Now, slowly, the influencer is getting changed to an organized retailer. So these are some of the challenges when you talk about demand sensing, and it is practically also really difficult for us. So that's how actually I tell my team, saying that go onto the ground, do you get to know what is it? And that's a big lever, okay? Today, as a norm, we keep 60 days of inventory. Sales loss nahi hua hai na, theek hai. This is what I would say supply chain guys are doing. Pure, mediocre kind of an activity that we are doing, and that's not what will take us to become a CEO. If you want to be a CEO, you need to actually challenge the status quo and say that, okay, what's the stock level? If the distributors have 60 days of stock, I'm not going to replenish any stocks. Just pull a foot stop. Can supply chain leaders do that? We're trying to do that in the organization. So I would say it's good to have tools, everything, but fundamentally there are certain practical things. I think Venkatari talked about there are certain human elements which need to be looking at. How is the actual business? Do you know your business on the ground? How does it happen? Okay, and it's not easy. You go with the sales guys, medical representatives, and to a doctor. The doctor, sir, this is my new product. He has an iPad and he scrolls it. The doctor doesn't even look at him. It doesn't have even 1 minute to it. And a senior vice president is sitting and saying that, okay, market visit just to gain some experience. That's the tough things. The doctors ko fir sample denge, ye denge. So you need to understand how the demand also gets generated. A lot of background needs to be done to actually make things happen. Okay, it's very good to take demand from it and question the sales guy saying that last month to bheja nahi, fir se kyun? Arey nahi yaar, target diya hai, hum karenge, kuch na kuch karenge. This is how things are happening. Having said that, there's a roadmap in terms of how do we actually bridge the gap. Okay, help sales and marketing understand, saying that if the distributor is supposed to keep at particular distributing point, there are some distributors who would stock 30 days of material, and the norms is also 30 days. Many are not even stocking 1 week of material. So can we actually build that up and try and reduce the inventory level? Instead of having 60 days of inventory at our warehouses, if we know that 30 days of stocks is already lying at my distributors, and I can reduce 30 days of inventory. That's the big ticket item that we need to look at. And how do you influence sales is what is. So the day you start influencing that particular part, I'm sure we're on the path of becoming a CEO.
Vijay, very interesting, and I couldn't agree more on what you're saying, because in the capacity of an Asia-Pacific supply chain, I see a different culture. I go back to what Saurav also mentioned, that each country geography behaves differently. I have seen set of forecast and demand sensing coming in from countries like Japan, Korea, Australia, proactively. I've seen customer placing orders 6 months ahead of the time, and 4th month they come back and say they may need shipment early or later. And it's exactly opposite here in such a big geography, and that's why I call India itself is a big region to cover within Asia Pacific. It's not easy. In India, we've got customers, pharmaceutical customers, where we also had to follow up on orders too. So I could understand the cascading effect, how it's coming down to the end suppliers. So thank you, very good insights. My next question, and as we are talking about businesses, if business gets a lot of insights and data, of course, it's going to help the business to boost, their revenue opportunities and make sure that they get the best of the performance metrics in place. Now, Neha, I would like to ask you this question: how to capture the disjointed and invisible data in an integrated business planning process? And I'm sure IBP is, a new term where the business gets involved. the SNOP plays a very important role, and then the execution piece. So how do you see that to get that gathered in IBP process?
I think that's the best excuse that you get from anyone, right? You might have the best of the models, but finally who is getting you all the data out, right? Like he said, is it actually the doctor prescribing and the consumer buying, or is it a biased data where you are getting it because there was somebody doing a target somewhere, right? And I think in this time and age, that's going to get critical. And we also heard it in the keynote, right, that the retail chain probably can give you that data as to how many bottles went out on shelf. So that's going to be the real fuel for supply chain. And I always go and tell, and thanks to now COVID, as we mentioned, that supply chain has now seat on table. And if you see post-COVID, most of the board members that got added most of them were supply chain, because people felt that this should be core and should not be left into back end. But you are not a marketing that you'll have a fancy, consumer experience thing to say, or you're not an R&D where you go and say, I have innovation, right? Data is what is the biggest fuel which can make the success of any supply chain, plus or minus, right? And how do you get it unified on one platform? Today, what is happening is you have best forecasting tool, but your supply planning is on a different setup. And hence, how do you have a middleware in place where you create a good data lake where everything is also talking to each other? Because somewhere or other, if you end up having 3 or 4 different platforms, which has its own purpose, because you want the best of the forecasting tool, which probably doesn't have the best of the distribution planning, right? Or doesn't do a justice to supply plan, doesn't sit. So how do you ensure that you have a system which kind of talks to each other, and which is now very well possible, right? So there is no dearth of data, and a lot of customers also give you offtake-wise data. At least at Nivea, we know most of our e-commerce partners gives us data on a day-wise offtake. So I can very exactly predict or see how much of stock of a Nivea 10 is lying in a warehouse in north somewhere or in south, right? And when do we see it getting out of stock? And hence we also advise the customers that probably you need to place an order here, or sometimes we go back and say, you should not order this material because you have a lot of stock, exactly to what you said. You should also not just owe up the inventory that is lying in your system, but also what is lying in trade, right? And that can only happen if you have unified data. So the success of supply chain would really define on what kind of data you have. How are you going to able to make sense out of it? Everybody has raw data, right? Tons and tons of it. How are you ensuring that you have, one, it speaks to each other at each node of supply chain? Secondly, how do you ensure that it is well integrated to give you some insights? If you don't have that in place, I think it's just, you can boast yourself having a lot of data, but it's of no use.
Thank you. Nihar, what are your thoughts on collecting this invisible and data which is disjointed in IBP processes?
Yeah, thanks Milind. And I have been listening to all my colleagues and very interesting conversations. And Milind, you have touched the very pulse of the very nerve of the entire, effectiveness of the supply chain. Data is the demand for the supply chain of analytics, right? So data is the demand for if the output you want as our supply chain is an analytics. So, and normally there are oceans and oceans of data we have, like Neha mentioned. So, but water everywhere, not a drop to drink, right? So if you don't channelize that. So I would take a step back and talk about the choices, right, which we may have to make a meaningful analysis of the data. So there are 4 important key parameters. The first one starts with what business we are into, right? The operating model, which is the fundamental of any supply chain. Whether you are a B2B business, whether you're a B2C, whether you are a direct-to-market business, whether your businesses, your P&Ls are piled up at geographies, your business units, your manufacturing locations. So all of this is critical to determine your operating model. Then you go into whether you want a centralized supply chain or a decentralized supply chain, whether some of the functions like procurement you may want centralized to leverage, planning function, logistics, you may still want to have a decentralized supply chain. So this operating model is very, very critical. Whatever is the operating model, right? But you may need to have a standardized way of collating the data. And I'm saying cautiously using the word standardization and not mentioning harmonize, because for a company who is in multiple businesses, the businesses may be very different from each other, and there may be very little scope for harmonization. But certainly you can standardize the way you collect the data, and which would be dependent upon the organizational design you have, right? Typically, an IBP design would be a demand planning organization, supply planning, logistics, customer service, procurement. It's important to have standardized KPIs or job descriptions of people who are doing these roles. Whether you are in a central organization or a decentralized organization, really the quality of data depends upon the quality of people, of course, but also what they are doing, right? The effectiveness of a supply chain is not about what, the design of a supply chain is not about what you are selling, but how you are selling, right? So if you have standard descriptions, you decide an operating structure and go after that, right? So whom these people will report into. You have a regional supply chain structure reporting into a central supply chain. Whatever is the operating your operating model, you design your structure based on that. The third and a very important part is to leverage your operating model to a very efficient SNOP process. So how you capture the data, right? Who runs the SNOP cycles? Normally, there is a tendency of the business heads driving their own agendas. And it's very important for a successful SNOP process to have executive sponsorship. So if there is no executive sponsorship, the process very quickly falls apart. The individual agendas are not important. There is only one head of supply chain, which is the customer, right? And the entire organization lobbies around that. Only the customer can have the authority to remove people from the jobs and nobody else. So it's very important to have these first principles right for a robust SNOP. And the final part is the digitization, which connects everything together, right? So there are number of tools available in the market for S2P planning processes. Go after, pick the right one, but please don't pick different tools for different parts of your organization, because then you are not unifying the data. So these are my few thoughts which would help to capture the unified data and put a robust IBP mechanism. Thank you.
Thanks, Nihar. My next question is to Vijay. As you know, there's no secret that unified data, real-time data is the way forward, to orchestrize a supply chain. So what are your thoughts? And I think you did talk about it, in the previous discussion, but what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's really important, okay? So supply chain today has various levers, whether you're an international business or a domestic business. Give an example of international business, but like there are levers within the supply chain. There is a procurement. Now within procurement, there are indirect, direct procurement, strategic sourcing, which talks about. Now why do you talk of this word strategic, okay? Why do you need the data? To make some strategic decisions collectively, which has a huge impact on the organization or capitalize on the opportunity. Now, let's say from a procurement perspective, if there are certain raw materials which are coming from China, or you don't have an alternate vendor supplying, you're dependent on it, your strategy for stocking them, for making sure they are available for your organizations would be different as well. Similarly, from a logistics point of view, okay? If from a planning perspective, I only look at the planning cycle, but I don't look at what's happening in the world across, the Red Sea, the Ukraine-Russia war, how does the lead time is impacting? Are we actually reviewing that lead time, okay? Which shipping company is more reliable in making sure they are reaching the US port on time? If it is if the lead times have increased from 25 days from Nova Shiva to New York port to additional 2 weeks, what is that impact would it have on me? Would I now ship more of my products by air? So these are some of the strategies which would also mean there's a cost involved. Many of the time in our SNOPs, we actually look at only the quantity and the numbers. One should also look at how does it translate into a value, the impact, the extra expenses, the air shipments or the sea shipments that you're doing, vis-a-vis X shipping line, vis-a-vis Y shipping line, why you need to choose them, okay? And their reliability, are you monitoring the reliability data? Saying that for us like US or many other countries, we found that Merck's is one shipping line that is clearly making sense. And we clearly know that this is a dynamic situation, so we clearly question our indirect procurement team saying that why don't we have a strategic contract with Merck's directly? Why are we dealing only with freight forwarders? Why can't we actually go beyond, have closure with the top 2 guys? So these are some of the things which we discuss, so that like when the costs go high, and you know what happened in China. So we need to predict saying that what's happening in China and why they're pumping more and more stocks, the demand from vessel, why it is not why it is getting cancelled in India and you're not getting that much of demand to actually move your cargo, and why the freight rates have gone double or triple. And by making sure you have a strategic contract, the cost doesn't increase at all. So these are some of the topics that we need to look at. Similarly, from a demand sector perspective, pharma is more of a regulatory perspective. Do I have what's happening at Nicholas Pharma? Do I know what's happening with Lupin? Do I know what's happening in Sun? The moment I get to know saying that X company, X pharma company, they've got Form 483, immediately look at what products they were selling in this US market, or which means that products coming out of this particular company would not be entertained by the US FDA, and we have that opportunity to actually now capitalize. Can we jack up the particular thing and make sure we supply to those customers? Do we know our customers in that particular market? So in US, when we look at, there are 5 big giants, okay, who actually control the entire network, like the Walmart, Mechanisms, and everything. How do we know them? Do you actually collaborate in terms of getting data of stock levels within their RDCs and making sure how can you directly supply them? So these are some of the topics, I would say, from a standard supply chain perspective, why data is clearly important is when you actually look at those trends, month on month, seasonality, what's happening to your suppliers. Many times the suppliers might also go debunked. So how do you take advantage of it and make sure that if anyone should have stock, it should be Alchem who would have the maximum stock, and we will be able to serve the market. The markets will not go dry, okay? I can give an example of COVID. During, Alchem is the #1 antibiotic companies in India. During COVID, we changed our stand. We selling vitamins. Why? Because everyone in the world was conscious about boosting immunity. Yeah? So we said, let's introduce new brands, A to Z Gold, Uprise D3. People were not going out, so we said immediately. So these are some of the ideas that should struck and make sure what is more important and make your supply chain agile using the data to the best of your, I would say, as an opportunity, I would say. Yeah?
Thanks, Vijay. Rajesh, do you have any additional thoughts to what just Vijay said?
Yeah. No, I think what he said is very important. You know, while Vijay was speaking, I was just trying to understand, let's say we all are there in supply chain. I will just visualize this entire thing with one simple example. Suddenly we get a demand from the market saying that, look, I need to sell more of this particular product in this particular market. So today, I'm just visualizing how a supply chain head or manager will do. First, he look at the demand, where is it coming in? That is coming through demand planning or through email or something like that. The second stage, what he does is that he has to go to either IBP, if person is having IBP, or they need to go back to the classic MRP runs in a SAP system and try to create a scenario saying that I'll increase the demand by so much, and then I have to run the MRP, and then I have to see whether I have raw materials or not. And then he has to go to a different system to look at plant manufacturing, plant scheduling. And then he has to go to a different system to look at if there is a raw material shortage, where is my raw material, is it in the high seas, or if it is actually cross the high seas at the port, is it lying somewhere in a bonded warehouse, to look in one system. And he'll go to a different system to look at the logistics. Now there are many solutions and many companies are applying a lot of logistics solutions. He has to go to that system to see how the truck is arriving, what are the turnaround times and all. So then he has to make a complete sense and then give a solution or answer to the sales team. So I think what we are all trying to say is that if there is a unified data which can pick up, I mean, I cannot pull out everything, but at least the major critical items and give a complete view, that is what something people would like to have. Today there are solutions which are optimized to the best possible extent in one particular area of supply chain, but it is all in different platforms, and no matter whatever difficult you try, you cannot have one solution for all these challenges what you face. So I think unified data is the path going forward, and it is not easy. At least I have not seen anyone who was able to unify all this data. We all keep talking about it, but maybe this is where something we should look going ahead in the future.
Neha, would you like to add something on that?
I think, like I said, I would say it is something that will define the success of your supply chain. If you don't get it right, well, you may have a lot of factors we'll put in, because the proof of supply chain functioning right is when the customer goes to the stores and finds your product, and that is fresh. Like, I really like the example 30 years ago, if Wagh Bakri Tea can claim that, you won't find a product which is less than a month old. That's amazing. Now, how do you ensure that you reach that kind of cadence? Because that's what matters. That's the kind of success that you would want to look into for your supply chain. All other metrics are more internal, but I would put the customer-facing matrix, which is be available, and be available in the way your customer wants you to be there. Right?
Thank you, Neha. And before we open up the question-answer session, I quickly would like to summarize. We all know how important and vital supply chain is, but for real, all the global organizations are still struggling to achieve, the complete visibility of entire end-to-end supply chain. Now, having said that, it drills down to the insights of the inside supply chain and outside the supply chain. So when we talk about that, it brings us with certain prescriptive and predictive insights. So on that note, thank you very much for the insights. I really had a absolutely mixed industry experience to talk about, and yeah, we are open to question answers. Yeah, go ahead. Mike, please.
Hello. Hi team, actually I heard of you. So my question is to Rajesh and Mr. Shetty. So a bit of disagree to both of you. So forecasting the demand. So one is saying you just take bias out of it. One is saying the sales projection. So I'm just made up something. Actually, it's a huge pressure. And logistics supply chain guy is like, it's least appreciated, but is high impact. Nobody will appreciate you. It's like the wicket keeper of a cricket team. You take the 9 catches, 1 catch missed, and the India will scold you. So because of you, the match is gone. So should we take the bias out of the forecasting, or should we take the sales projections?
To make sure you don't get, practical answer, to make sure nobody tells you for one incidence the world is after you, you should go, who would come after you? The sales guy alone. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah? Nobody else will talk about it because he loses his target and all that. Is to first, his priorities, making sure you are making available all the products on the to the distributors on time. That's one priority. Having said that, the second element is what is more important, otherwise he will never appreciate, which means that you have to actually go beyond and also assess and do scrutiny in terms of, I would not say post-mortem, but pre-mortem is what you need to look at to make sure that where the sales are happening, okay? And if you move further within the value chain, as I said, if you know what's happening at the distributor level, you will have much and much better control compared to what it is. So rather than being reactive, now you become more proactive, which means that if you know the distributors' stock levels and you have a integrated system with the distributors, instead of getting an order from the distributor, you will start replenishing, which means that you would look at the safety stock levels at the distributor levels and start replenishing. That would be an ideal scenario. That's where I'm saying as a scenario is very good, but like moving to this particular path, you will have obstacles. Obstacles like there are, I can take Alchem example, 8,000 distributors, but there are 258 ERP vendors, out of which if I now talk about integrating with everyone, it's practically impossible. So the best thing to talk about is to look at a Pareto principle saying that which are the top 20 distributors contributing to 80% of my life, 80% of my sales. So I look at only 2,300 distributors who will make things much, much better, and making sure if I integrate with them, instead of they are 30 ERP vendors. If I do that, still I'll be able to achieve that, I would say, the objective of making sure instead of predicting from it, I may also help sales saying that this is the stock levels already. Yeah. Does that answer the question? Or maybe Rajesh, you want to add?
I think what he said is absolutely true. See, bias by the very definition is called as bias when we see consistently there is a difference between the actuals and the forecast given, and that's what we say bias. Now, if you are consistently seeing that there is a variation, you may take a chance to build for the stock or don't build for the stock. But let's say in a practical situation, to be safe, right? Suddenly we don't know if suddenly there must be a good demand coming in and the sales guy will really be sitting on your head. So what we do, or what I suggest, is that basically you have to manufacture the stock, but don't keep it at the end distribution level at one particular depot or one particular distributor or whatever it is. Try to maintain certain safety stocks at your regional level so that in case there is a demand, I know this is not a very, let's say, a proactive approach, but at least you keeping the stock at a regional level, you can easily cater to demands coming from any other location, and maybe within 1 day or 2 days you can cater to the new demand coming from that particular salesperson or whatever it is. So I think you need to approach with a mixed strategies, like what Vijay said very clearly. Try to understand from the dealer or network whether it is really demand or not. Is it a push that is happening, or sometimes you need to carry certain amount of safety stocks at a, let's say, a regional level or a hub level, so that you can immediately push the stocks to the a particular salesperson what you are looking at.
So now the next question is relating.
Maybe he just wants to add.
I just wanted to add to his points. So from a supply chain leader perspective, you just need, well, that's my personal perspective, we just need to ask the right questions to the business. So I mean, we get a demand, and you can definitely say that you can give 3 views. One is the business level view, one is the product level view, and one is the SQ level view. I mean, you can go to that level of complexity, and you can always ask business like what is the percentage of plus minus bias of variability in demand that I should design my supply chain. Because the more variability you want to plug in, you will be carrying more inventory costs, and that actually has an impact on the cash flows.
Exactly.
So
my next question is exactly that.
And
actually,
then you have to answer to your CFO. And then he will ask me, because that's the biggest learning that all of us in this room have had our learnings from COVID. Because, because I can relate to it a lot because I come from the food supply chain industry. I mean, the inventory was stuck of certain crores, and we took some action. I mean, I'm sure you, sir, must have also faced the same in Pharma. I mean, India's big successful captain was a wicket keeper, so. Thank you.
So you answered actually, my next question was that exactly blocking the cash flow. So I got the projection from my sales team. I blocked some certain, let's say 100 CR is my inventory level, and my consumption is 20 CR. So maximum 60 days or 75 days stocks I should keep. That is some 40 35 odd capital, but I am stocking 100 CR. So my CFO and my CEO saying, so we're blocking my free cash flow. And sometimes what happens, let's say, so I am from healthcare. In rainy season, the dengue is the seasonal impact. So from, let's say, January to April, there is no sales. It's least sale generation. Once the rain comes, from mid of May to mid of September, the demand certainly goes 3x, 4x times. So how do you tackle that?
No, see, any, sorry.
Yeah, so in that case, your CFO and the business also knows that if they want to cater to that 3x, 4x kind of a demand, they need to also build stocks, okay? Assuming that, okay, you have ample of capacity, okay? So assuming that you need 100 unit, but your capacity may be like 500 unit, then you do not build stock. Then 3x, 4x, 5x tak bhi aap ja sakte ho, if your capacity is there. But if you don't have capacity, if you have 100 ka capacity and 3x, 4x karing, if you want to sell, which means that you can manufacture only 100. 3 months before only you should actually prepare for stocking materials in the warehouse and clearly tell your CFO saying that you are going to incur additional warehousing cost because of this particular thing. You have to align with your warehousing service provider for that particular extra space as well, okay? It can also lead to slow moving stocks where you can always build pallet. If you're putting it from a pallet positions, one of the nice way to is to also monetize it with a pallet position, saying that any stock which is lying more than 180 days, ideally I should have kept 60 days, but because I'm keeping it for 180 days, that extra days, I'm incurring additional warehousing costs. Organization would have said so much of cost, but because sales forecast was X, this is what is happening. So you need to keep things transparently. Many times what happens, supply chains, we are used to only listening. We are not, we find it very hard to challenge, to have a difficult conversation sometimes. I think we should start doing that, okay? That's why sometimes I tell my team, you're as good as me, okay? Think that you are a vice president. Drive your business with an entrepreneurial drive. If any vice president or even CEO say, you should have the ability to even ask him that difficult question. Simple as that. Of course, we leaders need to change that culture. It helps everyone. So that's the kind of talk which you do, okay? Please ask sales after the sales end saying that this much stocks did not go. Do you ask them? Start asking them all those difficult questions. You will see suddenly they will have empathies and tell them how did you actually make it available for it, okay? You have to plan because of which it is there. It's not that sometimes I think we underestimate our own, I would say, the work that we do. It's true actually if you ask me. Thanks.
My name is Shashikant Mishra.
Yeah. Quick one. As he was talking about proactive, I would say over communication is also important to do. When I say over communication, keep communicating, every signs, every signals you see. The more feed, of information you push forward, you will see a change in the behavior, of your sales team and commercial team to respond to you. I think I've learned that a lot. And I don't communicate, I over communicate. So it's very important to understand that. Sometimes we send an email and we feel, maine to bata diya tha. But honestly, keep doing your job, keep over communicating, and you'll see certain improvement. Improvement may not happen overnight, but you will see a behavioral change in terms of their responses. And I've witnessed that in past 5 years. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Shashikant Mishra. I'm from L&T Hydrocarbon. And after a very long time, today I'm hearing somebody is talking about people, which is started by Venkatadhari Saab and after that Vijay. Believe me, the management, what he's talked about, quality, time and money. Hardly there is anybody who talks about people. So I really give big thanks to Vijay and Venkatadhari. My question is we are talking about data management, we are talking about supply chain, we are talking about this and that. As long as the supply chain was not globalized, we had all system, Everything was confined area, and we were able to track those events which is taking place inside the premises of the enterprise. Now the activities which is going and happening outside of your premises, what are the mechanisms we have to track those events which is going to impact your entire supply chain? So this question is from Vijay. I think so many things he has talked about. So over to you.
So being external oriented is very key, okay? You would have seen a change, okay? It's the battle of survival, okay? There was a time where companies could run for 30 years, 40 years, but if that is the way, if you have to run an organization, the organization will perish. There are new ways of doing things, whether it is supply chain, whether it is marketing, anything which is new, and the company should be ready to put in an idea. So any idea which comes to us in terms of saying that how does it improve, of course quantified benefits and other things are there. So there are two ways of looking at it, okay? So if someone comes from top to down, I clearly put a break saying that what is a quantified benefit? Because just because someone B4 knows a managing director or a CEO, ultimately I have to own it. I really don't want to do goodies things. It has to come to me if I feel that, okay, it is clearly making sense, and the structure also has to change. A lot of times when you are into operations, you're not able to think. So at my way of working is to make sure you have at least 20% of your team working on continuous improvement. They're looking at fetching ideas, not only what's happening in pharma, but what's happening beyond. It's like, for example, if pharma has to improve, pharma has to look at what is FMCG doing. Pharma has to look at what is automotive doing, okay? We are still not talking about JIT. Vendor managed inventory is a very good concept, but to get into pharma, it becomes slightly easy. But how did the automotive guys implement it, okay? They make sure that the shop. So I think if we start thinking that way, maybe we want to go there. We may not reach in 1 year or 2 years, but because we have started thinking and building systems and processes to move there, I'm sure you'll go midway, and that is an advantage which the organization will have. So continuously reinventing is what should be there. I keep on saying that it's a difficult idea, okay? So getting connected to 8,000 distributors is a challenge, but when we did one pilot, it clearly, we now say that, okay, difficult hai, but ek din definitely hoga. Because if you consistently and persistently make sure that is, you're actually taking into that focused approach, I'm sure you would win with a clear strategy. And you have to make your sales guys, your management very clear, saying that if you want to move ahead, and how can supply chain contribute, okay? I can clearly tell if today anybody understands business from a sales side, from a supply side, it's only one function, which is supply chain. And I would say we are not utilizing to our best. We can actually give clear insights of saying that what's happening, even to the sales, saying that there could be some opportunities where you're not tackling, kind of a thing. So that's the kind of magic which can happen, and of course, data definitely plays a huge role. And I think, as Venkat says, today there is not one company which has all the solutions. And it's not that software alone will solve your problem. It's certain business decisions which is unique. So if you want to be a number one company, Alchem says, what is your goal? I want to be a number one company. So supply chain number one hona chahiye ki nahi? And how do you benchmark it? Within India or within world? So world mein kya better hua hai? Talk about those best practices, understand, read, try and see how we can. All implementations, we need to invest 2 million, 3 million and all that. I can tell you, I gave an example of an AI ML order to cash system that we actually implemented. We are hardly paying 30 rupees per order. Yeah? So many things are easy to implement, can be done faster, but the only thing you need to have an appetite of making sure there's a focused team whose work is only to look at things, and those teams should also go practically on the ground, roll up their sleeves and make sure what's happening on the ground and implement.
why we are not able to fix the mechanism? Like mechanism has to be in place. We are keep talking, but we are not able to really fix the issues. Okay, we'll take that question.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vijay. In the interest of time,
Thank
we
you so
like to
much.
move on. We have a hard stop for the next panel. I hope you understand. Thank you so much, panelists, for joining us.
Thank you all panelists. Sorry to cut this interesting discussion short. In the interest of time and because the next speaker has a hard stop as well, we had to continue with stick to the timelines. We are already running a little, late on our timelines. But they will be around. Feel free to catch up with them during lunch. Have any questions, chat up with them. I'm sure they'll be happy to share their personal experiences as well. Thank you all. Over to Tanishka.
Thank you so much, panelists. Moving on.